AFC North, great division. I'm going to go Ravens, Bengals, Steelers, Brown. Okay, the Ravens, the only thing I worried about is Ronnie Stanley, the left tackle, coming back? Answer is yes. Bengals, cheap franchise. Their three best players, Burrow, Jamar Chase, Hendrickson, even T. Higgins, their four best players, aren't particularly happy. Very, very top-heavy. But this year, I think basically Burrow and their star receivers will lead them narrowly to a wild card berth. Whether or not Aaron Rodgers goes to Pittsburgh or not, they are tone-deaf offensively, and over the last 5 years, they just consistently get bad late in the year. Steelers third. And I like the coach in Cleveland. They got Myles Garrett re-signed, but, what do they, fish rot from the top or the head or something like that? What's it saying? I just don't trust the organization ownership. AFC South.
Yeah. So I want to talk about this because it is actually kind of crazy when you look at it. When you look at it like this, when you look at the Ravens, actually, I think actually Ravens fans should be even more angry than I think they are. When you look at the Bengals, the Steelers, and the Browns, yeah, the Steelers have not known how to run an offense essentially for the last however many years, right? They haven't won a playoff game since 2016 or whatever the year is, a long time. The Browns, do I even have to say anything about the Browns? Come on, let's be serious here. And the Bengals, yeah, they got Joe Burrow. And I know there's always the big battle between, Lamar Jackson and Joe Burrow, but I think even Ravens fans can admit that Joe Burrow is obviously a really good quarterback. But the Bengals just have no idea how to run their franchise, in the slightest bit. Because the Bengals, I think about how you could have, Joe Burrow, Jamar Chase, T. Higgins, et cetera, and they can't even make the playoffs. That's just an embarrassment. Their defense has been so wildly inconsistent and bad, and yet they just kept running it back with the same old, and it just got them nowhere. And then you have the Baltimore Ravens, who are by far and away the best run team there, with just the most versatile, dynamic talent of Lamar Jackson. And so you're able to take advantage of this division, or at least you should be able to in theory. And it's just you should have such an advantage. Maybe not as much as the Chiefs, because then you can compare those teams to the Raiders, the Chargers, and the Broncos, at least before. That has obviously changed now. But, to be able to take advantage, at least during the Lamar Jackson era for the Ravens, to be able to position yourself to just feast on some of these teams, get these wins, get the 1 or 2 seed, get the bye, get the home field advantage in the playoffs, and get to the Super Bowl. The more this lingers, the angrier I get. And then if you just look at Colin's predictions right here, in terms of these are the teams that are going to make the playoffs. Now, the way how I want to approach this for this specific video is I just want to take this at surface level. Let's say that this is 100% accurate, which I'm not saying it is. I'm not saying it isn't. I'm not interested right now in trying to figure that out. Especially because, again, we have the draft, all this type of stuff. But, let's just say that this is true, okay? What team scares you? If you're the Ravens, what team are you oh, man, this is going to be I don't know. Because if we believe, Colin's whole theory is that the Chiefs are going to take a big step back. Obviously, you're not even going to win the division. Right? The Chargers scare you. CJ Stroud and the Texans scare you. The Patriots, they're the ones that are going to beat you. Drake May, they're gonna march into Baltimore and beat you. Right? I don't understand. And if you won the division, that means you're better than the Bengals. Unless this situation, the Bengals beat you 2-0, but yet you still were able to win the division. I guess technically that's possible. And so it's just the more Ravens videos I make, almost the angrier I get. And shockingly, and I definitely, at this point I've spoken to just a massive amount of Ravens fans because I make a ton of Ravens videos. And they're very, they're all online. They're ready to go. They're in the comment section, which, I respect and love, but they should honestly be angry. They should be more bitter. They should be more frustrated, and less forgiving in a lot of ways. Because if I'm looking at this, like even like the Bills again, who I think obviously Josh Allen is an unbelievable quarterback and all of that, but even then, especially in hindsight, when you look at these two teams, it's just like it almost feels like incomprehensible that the Ravens would find themselves in a position to lose to the Bills. Especially when you saw how the Bills, really failed to execute at a high level against the Kansas City Chiefs. And then when you see the Chiefs get rocked by the Philadelphia Eagles, you're just kind of like, how were the Ravens not actually there? Tom Brady, I think it was when they played the Steelers the second time, I believe. I believe it was when, Russell Wilson fumbled the ball kind of at like the 2-yard line or whatever, and then threw the interception. I think Lamar Jackson also threw an interception that game. I think it was that game when he called them a sleeping giant. He goes, this Ravens team is a sleeping giant. And I guess my question is why did that giant never wake up? And no, I don't count the Steelers game in the playoffs. It's just like, let's be serious here. The Steelers is like, what the heck were they doing that? Like, what the heck was that? So how did this team not wake up? If this team was truly a sleeping giant, which again, in hindsight, it feels like they really should have been. It's like, well, then why didn't they wake up? And that's why I always point to coaching. And that's when I always kind of just find myself in a corner when you're not making concrete changes at from a coaching perspective. It's like, well, then why will things be different? But I just feel like anytime we're talking about the Ravens and okay, the Ravens are going to win the division and this or that, I feel like I almost said this, just a few days ago, but it's just kind of like, if something doesn't change with the Ravens, like, I don't know how Ravens fans don't just lose their mind. I mean, you start to slip into just a significantly better version than the Dallas Cowboys, where it's just the same thing the Dallas Cowboys, they're going to win the NFC this year. Dak Prescott's going to be the MVP. You'd be crazy to think this year is going to be different. They're going to win the Super Bowl. And they don't even get to an NFC championship game. What am I even watching? Even the playoff games are just like, what was that? Congrats, you won 12 games. That's awesome. Great. That's fantastic. Oh, you beat the Commanders and the Giants when they didn't have quarterbacks? Like, fantastic. Good for you. The Eagles won 2 Super Bowls since Dak Prescott got drafted. So I don't care about your 12-win seasons. And the Ravens just have a better version of that because you have Lamar actually being the MVP. They are winning these games. They can put up an onslaught of points. But it's just kind of like, I just want to shake them because it's so cyclical. Every year after year, it's like, the Ravens. And it's like, yeah, when is it going to be the Ravens? When is it going to be the Ravens? Like, that's what I keep waiting for. And with each year that passes, I'm just kind of like, what's going to be the difference maker? What is going to finally be the change? And I don't think it's Lamar Jackson. Like, I don't think it comes down to Lamar Jackson. I don't think that's fair to just put that all on Lamar. Does Lamar need to continue to grow and evolve and get better? Of course. Tom Brady talked about, like, even in his 15th season as a quarterback, he was still learning what defenses could throw could throw at him. So you're always going to try to learn and grow and evolve. But when you kind of just look at this, especially when you get the gift of having, 2 teams, especially in your division, sometimes 3, depending on the year, that are just kind of like running around with their heads cut off, you're just like, bro, you better win the division. I mean, think about even just kind of how the Steelers season ended. To think that they even had a chance to win the division compared to the Ravens is kind of like, how was that even actually a conversation? Because I think at one point it was actually technically in the Steelers' control at that point. And you're kind of like, considering how that season, ended, you're kind of just like, how was it even a possibility that the Ravens couldn't win the division? Especially when you even see the Ravens beat the way how they beat the Bills. You're like, how are the Ravens not the 2 seed? How are the Ravens not in a position to win, to get to lock in the 1 seed instead of the Chiefs? And again, that's where execution comes from. That's where preparedness. That's when you start looking at, like, oh my God, they had 12 penalties that game for over 100 yards. Like, what? Like, how is that even? How is that even a thing? How is that even possible? And et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Needing to get a win, and now, you have to play your starters in the final game of the season, and now Zay Flowers goes out, and now you don't have him against the Bills. Like, it's all connected. It's all connected. All connected. And it's just, yeah, I find it frustrating. I really do. I really, really do. And so when I see a clip like this, it's like, honestly, like that's what it triggers for me. And it feels very Dallas Cowboys. And again, and if you're new to my channel and you're watching this video, like I am not a Ravens hater. Like I am a defender. I am a defender and a Lamar Jackson defender. But it's just like I get Dallas. It's funny because uh Colin has a take about Kirk Cousins, especially more when Kirk Cousins was, younger and a little bit more in his prime. He says, Kirk Cousins and Dak Prescott are essentially identical quarterbacks, but just like Dak is just cooler, right? He's just Dak Prescott, Kirk Cousins with like a Nike deal or, however exactly he phrased it. And that's almost what it feels like with the Ravens and the Cowboys, because it's just like year after year after year, it's like this team, man, they're going to win. They're going to look at that. Look what they did last year. This year, it's going to be different and this or that. Great quarterback. But the difference is that the Ravens, just like, Lamar Jackson is just obviously, it's not even close, better than Dak Prescott, and wins MVPs and puts up records and does all this type of stuff. But then it's just like, what else? And quite frankly, I can make the exact same take for the Bills, probably even more so. Because you're just like, the Jets are going to beat you this season, like the Jets, the Dolphins, like that's who's going to beat you. Look around, and that's why it does. If you're looking at this at face value, you would look at the Bills and the Ravens again. If we do believe that the Chiefs, after getting dominated, maybe that's too much of a recency bias. That the Chiefs are still obviously going to be this great team. Don't discount them in the draft. They're going to fix their O-line, et cetera, et cetera. Rashee Rice is going to be back, and they'll be back to being the Chiefs that we all know. But let's just say that's not the case. Again, I'm not predicting it in any direction. So if you're a Chiefs fan watching this video, don't come at me. I don't care. But let's just say that is the case. It's just like, right. Like, you're going to let any of these teams, for both the Bills and the Ravens, like, you're going to let any of these teams get in your way? CJ Stroud is going to leapfrog you? The Chargers? The Patriots? The Bengals. Again, the Bengals have the best argument technically, but you're going to let the Bengals, this franchise that has been running around in circles with such nonsense season after season after season with defenses that I feel like I could put up points against? Like, that's who's going to leapfrog you? They're the ones that are going to get to the AFC Championship game, or dare I say, beat you and get into the Super Bowl? Like, you're just like, how? How could that be? So then again, it goes back to like, well, then what could possibly be the excuse for coming up short? And if you can't think of an excuse right now, then there's no actual excuse outside, of course, like injuries, which that's not an excuse. That's a reason at that point. So it's just kind of like, like, I don't know, because it's just, when you actually really look at it, you're kind of like, who should stop you? If you're Lamar Jackson, the Baltimore Ravens, who do you think is going to be able to stop you? Who should be able to stop you? When I look at the other division, I look at the NFC, and the Eagles obviously just won the Super Bowl, and you're looking at these other teams, and you're like, yeah, the Commanders, I can see them coming. Of course, the Eagles should have, the advantage, but you're like, yeah, no, Jane Daniels, et cetera, they're really coming. And you can see the team, what they're able to build off of. The Rams, like, yeah, man, they made some moves this offseason. Like, they're taking a gigantic step forward. And to be fair, I think the Chargers will be better. I think the Bills should be better. Like, I think these other teams, it's fair to say that they're also getting better, but it should feel still less threatening, especially if you're a team like the Ravens that have had this continued high level of play. And the Eagles, at least, are also kind of struggling where, like, they kind of have to continue to rebuild because they just won, so they're losing players. They're losing their, coordinator. Like, there's actually some issues that the Eagles will fundamentally have to face and reconcile with, because that's what happens when you win the Super Bowl. That's not the experience. That's not the situation with the Ravens. That's not the situation with the Bills. So yeah, it just feels so cyclical, and it's just, it's easy when you look at a team like the Cowboys to kind of make fun of them, to be like, yeah, okay, here we go again, because it's actually just funny to watch, because you're just like, look at the delusion. Like, their big move is like, we're going to get Ezekiel Elliott now. And it's like, oh yeah, he didn't even finish the season. They sent him home. So it's like, that was their big off-season move. Like, congrats. But it's like, it's not funny with the Ravens, because you're just like, dude, like, you actually should be winning, because it's not actually smoke and mirrors. The Dallas Cowboys, it's more smoke and mirrors. With the Baltimore Ravens, it's not. It's a reality. When we look at that team as being like the top offense or a top defense, like, it's actually real. It's not cooked books at all. So it's just like, but what's also real is coming up short. The inability to step up when it matters, the inability to win a tight situational football game against the Bills, against the Chiefs, etc. To lock up the 1 seed, get home field advantage, and then actually show up in the AFC Championship game. Like, that's the difference. The execution, the lack of penalties, or the excess of penalties, depending on what side you want to look at it. So it's just like, how does that all change? How does that all change? I saw Lamar Jackson when, I forget what game it was, but it was when he lost. Might have been against the Eagles, actually. I forget what game it was, when he was just like, man, I'm sick of this. And he goes, when he was like, my mom yelled at me or whatever, I forget what game it was. And he was just like, I'm sick of this. And he's like, I'm going to, we're going to get after it. And I was excited by that. And it did. He did. Like, his mentality changed. He played more free. He kind of, retouched what made him special. And I loved it. And it was great. When am I going to see Harbaugh have that moment? When am I going to see other players have that moment? When am I going to see other people in the coaching staff just be like, enough? Like, does Harbaugh ever march in a meeting and just say, does he scream and just be like, enough? If we get more than 5 penalties, I'm throwing you all out. I'm cutting every single one of you. I don't care. Like, does he ever reach a point where it's just like, enough? Because I'm not saying that all coaches need to yell or be like, real strict, because that's not even what I like personally. But sometimes you do. Sometimes it does. It needs to be enough. Enough. You either are ready to play or you're not. You're either ready to step up or you're not. You're either ready to make the plays or you're not. It does become binary at a certain point. So it's just like, when is it going to shift? When is it going to change? When is it going to snap? When is it going to register? Because for the life of me, like, I can't do this with the Ravens over these next few years. Where it's just like, they're a top team. They're going to win the division. Lamar Jackson, he is special, isn't he? Did you see what he did, on Sunday? Oh, my goodness. Do you see his final numbers? Look at that. He's top 3 in every category. And it's like, that's awesome. That is awesome. Can you just make it all finally matter? And if not, then what are you doing to change it? What are you doing to change it? And I had conversations recently, because I made a recent video about the Ravens and getting DeAndre Hopkins, etc. And someone was like, listen, it wasn't like the lack of talent why they lost. And it's just like, and it's like, yeah. And he's like, so like, they were like, there's no big moves from a roster standpoint that the Ravens could make to, like, take them to that next level. And let's say that that's true. If that's true, then that's even worse. That you came up short then. It's even worse that you believe that you had the team that was truly ready to win, and that's what you got. That's even worse then. So where's this shift going to come, and when? That's what I'm waiting for, because right now the Baltimore Ravens really are just a better version of the Dallas Cowboys, and they should not be, because on one side you got Dak Prescott, on the other side you have literally Lamar Jackson. When we tell the whole story of the NFL, if the NFL ended tomorrow, and we looked back and had to tell the story of the beginning and the end of the NFL, that story would have to have Lamar Jackson in it. You could not tell the story of the NFL without mentioning Lamar Jackson. Yeah, Dak Prescott's just a quarterback. He's just a guy that they'll be like, oh, remember that? Who was that quarterback for the Dallas Cowboys? What was his name? Yeah, he had it was like an interesting name, right? It was like a Max or like a Dart. What is it? Oh, Dak. You're right. Oh, right, Dak. Do you remember him? Yeah, I remember him. No, everybody will remember Lamar Jackson forever. So, show it, prove it, be it. But those are just my thoughts. I'd absolutely love to hear yours. What do you guys all think about Lamar Jackson, the Baltimore Ravens, winning the division, according to Colin, and yet again being a top team in the NFL? But where will it go? Where will it go in 2025? Let me know in the comments below. I read every single comment. It's whether you agree with me or disagree with me. Either way, let's get in some discussions. Let's get in some fights. But ultimately, let's just have some fun. And please do consider subscribing. We're building an amazing community here and absolutely love to see you part of it. I want to build something that we all genuinely feel connected to. Something that we're really excited to be part of. I think we're well on our way to doing it. And please don't forget to give this video a thumbs up, as it really does help with the visibility and the algorithm. Thank you so much. See you next time.